explicit.
Sorry, on casual sex.
What constitutes as casual sex?
The hookup culture.
By hookup culture.
The consequences of the hookup culture.
It's important that you know you can leave at any time.
Casual sex and self-love. And the one thing they never include in this conversation is the purpose of sex.
The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade on Friday. And
decline of marriage. They would not even televise married couples sleeping in the same bed. Now they don't just sleep in the same bed, there are full-blown sex scenes. And even kinkier sex practices are becoming more normalized. The rise of OnlyFans. Welcome to the dark truth about casual sex. This is a deep dive. Hi, my name is Brianna from Self Love Starts Now, and this channel is dedicated to healthy self-love. Loving yourself without being self-centered, because when you can love yourself well, you will treat other people better, and that's what it is all about. And today I am talking about something that I have avoided for a long time: sex. When it comes to talking about sex, there's an interest and curiosity, but there's something about this subject that feels inherently personal. But today I am not holding anything back. If you didn't notice, this video will be explicit, so if there are little ears around, this may not be the best time to watch this video. Not only am I going to be talking about sex, but there is so much to cover that this will actually be a series with multiple parts. Just in this video alone, I spent so much time writing up what we're going to be talking about today, so buckle in. During the holiday season, it is a tradition for me to watch at least one episode of The Twilight Zone. It's a classic sci-fi that originally aired in the 1950s. While the show was considered taboo at the time, one thing that wasn't taboo was showing married couples sleeping in separate beds. Now, as someone born over 30 years after the first airing, this just seems so weird. I earned my degree in psychology and minored in history, so I've always been fascinated by the stories behind cultural shifts, especially how societal norms evolve over time. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to explore the history of how we've gone from those days of separate beds to the normalization of hookups and pop culture today. But as a true history buff, we have to go further than the 50s. So what's really interesting to me is that we see in ancient times, sexuality was often viewed as both recreational and also extremely sacred. In ancient Egypt, sexuality was intertwined with religion. A lot of people in the States attribute high sexual standards like abstinence as a Western concept or something that just came from Christianity to control people, especially women, with shame. But even in ancient Egypt, expressing oneself sexually was deeply intertwined in their religions and myths. They believed in gods like Isis, symbolized fertility and procreation. Because of this, sex was an act of divine connection. Similarly, in ancient Greece, sex held sacred value during fertility rituals, but was also recreational and tied to status. In ancient Rome, society embraced sexual freedom, and there were even public depictions of sex in art and culture that we have all probably seen. However, it also served practical purposes such as solidifying power or alliances. These civilizations often revered sex as more than just physical pleasure. It was seen as integral to community and spirituality. It wasn't always tied to deep emotional connection or monogamy, but it was acknowledged as an act that held a lot of power. While different religions profoundly shaped views of sex around morality, this historical reverence stands in stark contrast to how casual and transactional it has become in modern pop culture. Which brings us to the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution I'm describing here is technically the second sexual revolution, taking place in the 1960s. It was really a social movement in the Western world that challenged the traditional behaviors of sexuality. This movement is widely known and associated with the pill, public nudity, pornography, premarital sex, homosexuality, masturbation, alternative forms of sexuality, and abortion. As someone who leans more conservative, I could actually understand why the sexual revolution had such a powerful impact. For so long, people, especially women, were bound by societal expectations, trapped in a cycle of shame and silence. Something had to break those chains. But as I dug deeper into the history, I uncovered something much darker and far more unsettling. While some were experiencing liberation, others were being silenced, tormented, and subjected to even greater shame. The ripple effects of that time reveal a truth that is both eye-opening and deeply disturbing, but more on that later. Those who initiated this revolution believed that there was a detrimental impact of sexual repression. If you have never heard of this term, it was first used by Sigmund Freud, who I have studied for over a decade. Sigmund Freud is known as the father of modern psychology. Now, not to go on a rabbit trail, but there are some really important things you have to know about Freud that strangely ties into the casual sex in today's culture. You see, as the father of modern psychology, Freud had an elaborate theory of the unconscious mind. He also had quite elaborate theories of sex. He, for one, came up with libido, which he described as sexual energy. We now know and use this term pretty much synonymously with sex drive. I'll just cut to the weird stuff to save a little time. But Freud believed in infantile sexuality. We know from science, infants and young children do not have developed sex hormones. This gets really weird because many of Freud's patients experienced childhood sexual abuse. However, because Freud had his different theories and beliefs, he actually believed the sexual abuse his patients experienced were in totality fantasies. He also believed young children become unconsciously sexually attracted to their opposite sex parent. Why did he think these strange things about sex? Because remember, he believed in layers of the mind that is deeply unconscious and sexual regression, bringing us back to the sexual revolution.
Our society and much of the Western world, and apparently, at least to the same degree, the eastern part of the world as well, is still suffering from really deep-seated sexual repression. And
with the sexual revolution, the basic idea was that suppressing your sexual desires or sexual urges is bad for you.
Let's talk woman to woman. Nowadays, we're free to do so many things. Women have more alternatives.
During this time, the FDA approved the first birth control pill in the world, which is a huge deal. Also, penicillin was discovered around this time. Now, if you don't know, penicillin is a drug that kills harmful bacteria. Most of us have been prescribed it at one point or another for bacterial infections like strep throat, ear infections, or a respiratory issue. Well, the discovery of penicillin made sex skyrocket because people felt having sex more casually would be safer for them. Penicillin is effective at treating sexually transmitted infections like syphilis, which was once deadly. So with reduced fear, sex increased. During this time, we see divorce rates increased, marriage rates decreased, gay rights movement came on the scene. Erotic novels that were banned in certain places were brought to the US Supreme Court to be unbanned, and were. Movies began showing nudity, which turned into featuring real sex acts in mainstream film. And let's not forget sexualized fashion. In 1964, pretty random, something called the monarchy came out, also known as the topless bikini. Then there's nonfiction books about sex, and the new emergence of pornography, the rise of Playboy, the rise of rejection of Abrahamic religions, the rise of weed, the rise of recreational drugs, increased adultery. A lot was happening. And to kind of sum it up, there was this relaxed attitude, self-imposed poverty, and laissez-faire sexual behavior. Side note, if you're like me and wondering why the sexual revolution even ended, like, they seem like they were just doing whatever they wanted, and who would want to stop doing what they want? Well, in the early 80s, the public became aware of AIDS, the deadly transmitted disease. So I think that answers that.
The sexual revolution. I feel we're going into the, beginning of an emotional revolution, because our play is not just a nude play or a sexual play, or it's we don't just take our clothes off and say, "Look, I am nude." It's all very natural.
What is do you find it difficult or embarrassing in any way performing sexually or making love on stage?
No, I don't. I think it's a very natural act. And first of all, I do think that the stage is sacred. Anything that can happen on the stage, because where else could things happen? So in the pure form. And we also have a chance to express our moments, private moments in public.
Now, the sexual revolution didn't just seek to break the sexual confines of the 40s and 50s, but the moral confines as well. Keep this in mind. Remember when I said I found something disturbing in my sexual revolution research? Well, I came across an article called "The Sexual Revolution's Angry Children." It simply suggests the consequences of the sexual revolution, like prioritizing liberation over accountability. And the truth is, with the sexual revolution, it actually widened the gap of this so-called liberation and actual lived experiences for women as a whole.
What reasons do they give for not wanting a woman?
Oh, well, many and varied. One company told me that I might be raped if I go into the plant.
Issues like male aggression, workplace harassment, and even with porn, it was more objectifying and violent than in earlier times.
Rosemary, seeing you always brightens my day.
Please, Mr. Gatch!
I'll have to stop reading Playboy.
I just kept coming across more and more disturbing information, such as the rise of organizations like NAMBLA. Have you heard of it? It's the North American Man-Boy Love Association, and basically they work to abolish age of consent laws. Thankfully, it was difficult for those type of organizations to really break ground because their leaders kept getting jailed for, But it was all making sense because, again, the sexual revolution wasn't just to break sexual confines, but moral confines as well. So what do you expect when you strip a society's morals. History is important, but history does not always get it right. So it's unwise to say, well, they did this in ancient times, so it's clearly normal and natural. For anyone who has studied history, you know we don't always see people getting it right, but we just see people learning and trying to figure things out. After all, it was once normal to medically practice in ancient societies draining blood. They used to drain blood of someone who was physically or even mentally ill with the thought process of removing the affected blood. This was called bloodletting, but we know that removing blood from someone sick will only further weaken them because blood holds life. I have to say, the more I learned about this whole topic of casual sex, the more I realized this video could have been 10 videos. There is so much history, psychology, and nuance here, but today I am sharing what I believe to be the most important part, so let's get to it. Casual sex. Now, before we go any further, let's clarify what really is casual sex and how it became such a significant part of modern culture today.
You swear you don't want anything more from me other than sex?
You swear you don't want anything more from me?
No relationship, no emotions, just sex. Swear.
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 We've just explored how history shapes societal attitudes towards sex, but to truly understand its role in our lives today and how it connects to self-love, we need to break down what casual sex means and the reason so many people turn to it. So casual sex or hookups are really sexual activity that happens outside of a committed relationship, therefore is void of commitment. Hookups are also meant to be void of feelings and emotions. Some people turn to casual sex because it offers a way to fulfill a natural desire for sexual release without making commitments. Many people turn to casual sex because it feels like a quick solution to emotional voids. When you've been hurt, rejected, or feeling unworthy, casual sex can seem like a way to reclaim power or distract yourself from pain. In moments of loneliness, stress, or even boredom, casual sex can seem like a quick fix. For some, it's also seen as a way to explore their sexuality without being judged by someone they actually love and care about. Many turn to it as a way to feel wanted, validated, and connected, especially during times of insecurity or heartbreak. After all, the physical, intimate moments of sex, even if fleeting, can mimic the closeness and affection that we all crave. However, because it's surface level, it rarely addresses the deeper longing for emotional intimacy. It becomes a cycle, seeking sexual release to feel good in the moment, while the emotional needs that drive these choices often remain unmet. This duality is what makes casual sex both alluring and complicated.
If you do catch feelings for someone, a lot will change. Like all of a sudden you stray off your path, you start getting soft, you start getting weak, too available, too nice. And then if that does happen, you actually end up pushing that girl away that you really like.
For others, casual sex stems from a fear of vulnerability. Letting someone in emotionally requires trust, patience, and the risk of being hurt. Casual encounters, on the other hand, are often seen as less risky. This is really true in a culture that emphasizes independence and not catching feelings. Isn't that what we love bragging about, not catching feelings? From dating apps to pop songs, we're told sex can be as casual as ordering takeout. But is that true?
Should tell my boyfriend what I've been doing. Been thinking of you every time I screw him. And if you want me, you gotta put the word in. Go tell your girlfriend that I'm your girlfriend.
Why is it even important that I'm covering a topic like this? Well, if you are new here, I cover many different topics and relate them back to self-love because at the end of the day, the way we treat ourselves is how we will treat others. And I believe casual sex is directly related to self-love and identity. Here's where things get interesting. Did you know your brain doesn't know the difference between casual and committed sex? Whether you're hooking up or deeply in love, your body still releases the same exact bonding chemicals. These bonding chemicals include oxytocin and dopamine and several others, but I'm just talking about these two for now.
You're going to feel the sense of being addicted to your partner.
Oxytocin is a naturally occurring hormone that helps with bonding with others. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in the brain's reward system, driving feelings of pleasure and desire and motivation. If you're like me, you're thinking, well, aren't we always getting shots of dopamine? Like when we eat a piece of chocolate, when we scroll on our phones, when we get an Amazon delivery. Yes, but here's the difference. Dopamine acts as a bonding chemical during sex by reinforcing pleasurable experiences and creating emotional connections. Its release strengthens the association between the partners and the feelings of reward, ultimately promoting intimacy and attachment. Now, please listen. This happens for women and men. I know we love to just say that this is for women, but this happens for women and men. Men, you release these chemicals too. And casual sex disrupts brain chemistry. Our brains are wired to bond during sex, but when that bond is broken repeatedly, it leads to emotional detachment and even trauma.
With prolonged trauma, the amygdala becomes hyperactive, constantly sensing threats, even when they aren't there, leaving you in a state of high alert, anxiety, and fear. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate decision-making and control emotions, can become less active.
Your biology is designed for deeper connection, even when you try to keep it casual. So I mentioned trauma, and that is a really big deal. Engaging in casual sex has dramatic implications on psychological well-being. When you introduce yourself to casual sex, you really pull a wild card that shakes up your mental well-being. Whether you're a man or woman, you are risking STIs, unplanned pregnancy, shame, regret, low self-esteem, insecurity, comparison, heartbreak, reputation damage, emotional detachment, unfulfilled expectation, physical discomfort, and unsafe situations. Any of these things could happen at any moment, so you're really playing that wild card with your life. So the idea of yourself, your life, your future is at question, and it opens the door to doubt. This eliminates the possibility of having pure confidence. Casual sex stems from a lack of self-worth, leading to a vicious cycle of seeking validation.
I would like to say my heart wasn't broken, but when I go back and look at all the times that I engaged in sex, it was really a self-esteem issue. It was truly self-worth. It was truly self-worth.
Because casual sex influences self-worth, it will also influence the way you choose partners. Here's what one peer review article read. In the first study to investigate the issue of self-esteem in hookups, both men and women who have ever engaged in uncommitted sexual encounter had lower overall self-esteem scores compared to those without uncommitted sexual experiences. The potential causal direction of the relationship between self-esteem and uncommitted sex is yet unclear. It's not unclear. It is completely normal for anyone sharing the most intimate, sacred parts of themselves casually to feel used, unimportant, and disposable, which obviously erodes self-worth over time. Research has shown more depressive symptoms and greater feelings of loneliness for those who engaged in penetrative sex hookups. Here are some feelings people report feeling after a typical hookup: regretful, disappointed, confused, uncomfortable, embarrassed, and even scared. Casual sex might promise connection, but science shows it often leaves us feeling more disconnected than ever.
We had a lot of adolescents, obviously, but my youth group was special because I was blessed to be able to have ones that were from 13 to 25, okay? So we were dealing with, high school and college level. So I became very knowledgeable about STDs. I actually had a box and I would give them index cards and I would say, you do not put your name on it, ask any question you want. And it was absolutely phenomenal. That's actually how the seminar started, because when I would put the cards there, Brianna, guess what the cards said when I would take them out of the box? If you think about girls, are you a lesbian? If you sleep in the same bed as a guy, can you get pregnant? Can you get pregnant from just like making out? I mean, just stuff that was just unbelievable. Wow. And so they had so many questions, and that's what brought on. I said, hey, we have a responsibility to answer some of these questions and to give them a safe place, a healthy place to be able to find out about these things. And then to add on, the man that I was married to at that time, he worked for the health department and he worked in the STD department. So they don't call it that. They call it the disease immunological disease department. And so his job was literally to contact people, to first of all do an initial consultation with someone coming in who just got tested for free. They would have whatever STD it was, no matter what it is, and then he would have a meeting with them. He would do interview them, and his objective was to find out who they slept with so he can contact them and find them. He would leave notes in their house, and
someone would go into that office,
take a free exam to see if they had any STD.
And they had to list partners of theirs?
Yes. Now, obviously, it's not, nobody's gonna make you, and you know what I mean? But because of the way that they trained them, because of the, what is that word? The rapport they would have with them, they would make them feel very comfortable. These people would literally share their list of sexual partners. And because of this, it was very overwhelming to see how people were really living, men and women, having 20 partners, 30 partners, or even up to more, as far as like if they were like men with men or women with men or women with women, whatever it was. And he would have to go out and literally had a company car and call them. And he wouldn't say their name. He would just say, I'm calling from the health department and someone has contracted something. And we are advising you to visit the office when you can, and you be tested for free as well.
That's crazy.
Yes, so that was his...
Imagine getting that call.
Exactly. Obviously, it's important to remember as well that a person didn't have to have intercourse. They could have just had oral sex. They could have just literally made out. But because herpes can be in the mouth, syphilis can be in the mouth, different things can be in the mouth, even if they just made out, they might have still given their information to contact them because there's still any contact, even if there's no intercourse. And that's one thing I just really feel like people don't understand of how easy it is to contract the STD. A condom cannot protect you from every STD, like absolutely not. If you just made out with someone but there was no intercourse, but your body was connected to theirs.
What do you mean
in that
connected?
region, there's no intercourse occurring. The genitals, all the genital area. So if you have a condom on and you're having intercourse with someone, all of their genitalia, all that means their pubic hair, pubic area, even if they shave, their testicles, the entire groin area. If you just make contact with that area, you have what they have now. Now you have HPV now. So HPV is by skin contact, human papillomavirus. And because it's called that, you'll have it for the rest of your life, okay? But people don't fear it so much like HIV and AIDS and, oh my gosh, herpes, because they just feel like, oh, and it affects men and women differently. So for women, HPV it doesn't have to, but it can result in scars in your cervix. So HPV is the reason why every woman who loses their virginity is recommended to have a pap smear every single year. Because the whole point of the pap smear is to check the scars if you have any scars in your cervix. Scars in your cervix can lead to cervical cancer. Wow. So that's what they're looking for. When they put that pap smear and they open you up and they're looking, yes, they could take a swab. Yes, they can test it as well to see if there's anything there. I just want to be clear, like, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I just had to be knowledgeable about this so I can share with the young people that were coming to me with questions, that were concerned, that they say, hey, I saw this thing down there, I don't know what it is. Plus the person I was married to had to be an expert on these things as well. So we would discuss it and talk about it. For a man, HPV will come out as warts on the outside. And I don't think I think they underestimate how intimate oral sex is and how intimate making out is. I personally think syphilis is one of the most disturbing and dangerous, and I would like to explain why. Because there's primary and secondary syphilis, and primary would be something where just comes out like sores, okay? And it could come out in their back, or like the palm of their hands, or the bottom of their feet. And the reason it's so insane is because if that person is like, oh, maybe it's something else, or says, let me just go to CVS and get a cream, and let me just kind of deal with this topically, let me not get tested, let me just, I don't know, maybe it'll go away. The reason it's so insane is that it will go away. All the sores that are visible on the body go away. And when they go away, that is a sign of secondary syphilis that is inside, and that makes people blind. It literally destroys the soft tissue inside their bodies. That's organ and even their brain. And the reason it's so important to talk about it is because when I speak to women who are in their 30s, in their 40s, they have a mortgage, they literally have a career, they have a profession, they have children, they are newly single, newly divorced, or maybe looking for someone to be with. They are going on these dating websites and they are meeting someone, and I don't know where, I don't know how, but in 2025, it doesn't make sense how so many women could think it's normal to kiss someone that you just met or had like a second date with or a third date with, like to kiss them, and then even more like kissing like with your open mouth. That is not wisdom. You should not be kissing anyone. You have no idea where they're from or what they're doing. So for example, there was a massive outbreak in our county of syphilis, and you didn't hear it on the news. There's no billboards, there's no advertising, there's nothing. They didn't tell anyone.
But you knew about this because of the partner you
Exactly.
were with.
I knew about it because of the person I was married to. And then they had an outbreak of gonorrhea at a high school. And they literally had to send multiple employees to go to this high school to test these young people because it was crazy.
Okay, so my question is, what can someone do? Someone in the dating market, you're probably not advising people to have sex the moment, like the first day they meet someone, you want to get to know them. What can someone do?
I would remember, number one, that feelings are not facts. That is absolutely vital. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter if you feel safe with them. You have to understand that any person you're just meeting is just that. You are just meeting them. Any physical contact, whether it is French kissing, it's called heavy petting, where the definition is literally, rubbing each other's genitals outside of the clothes. You should not be touching anyone's genitalia with your hand, because whatever they have on their body, you're gonna have now on your hand. And you could say, well, I could wash it and all this stuff, but that opens doors, okay? If you're a human being and you're alone with another adult and you are going to practice this type of making out where there is heavy petting, where hands are going inside of the clothes, all you're doing is opening doors logically that it's going to proceed. It's going to escalate. It's going to excite, and it's going to open the door. There might be intercourse, there might be oral sex, there might be these things. So a loss of control. With these different things happening now with the dating sites. A person is literally just going to share what they want you to know. They're not going to put on a profile everything they've done sexually. They're not going to put how many partners they have. They're not going to share they are bisexual or consider themselves polyamorous. If they do, that is phenomenal, but not everyone's going to do that. So it's not wisdom for someone to be on a date with someone and just feel free because they feel comfortable to French kiss and make out and, you know, touch them and touch their gender or have oral sex or even have sex with them, because there's other people, like, you know, will say 6 months, okay? But I would say it's even more important to talk about the topic and to be honest, because you just can't assume that someone is like you, and there's some things that will not go away. Another example is like herpes. You can't contract it if the person doesn't have an outbreak, is not in an outbreak. But people that don't have the sexually transmitted disease herpes, they still have could get cold sores on their mouth. So you could look at someone's face and say, hold on, it looks like a cold sore. Let me not kiss them because I don't know what's going on there, if it's herpes or if it's just a cold sore like normal people get and they don't really have an STD. But what about the genitalia? Do you think a person in the heat of the moment is going to take a flashlight out and inspect the genitalia of the person that they're with? There's no way. You're not going to do that. That's why it's important to talk about these things beforehand, because the repercussions is just absolutely dire. Also, if I could say, please, you have no idea what man pays for prostitutes. He literally goes to a place in a city outside the city limits and he goes and he gets prostitutes. I'm just saying, you don't know what people are doing. So it's your job to have wisdom. And it's not wisdom to connect yourself with someone if you don't know more about them. And I understand it's a stigma. If someone sees your history and you saw a video or did a Google search on it, they'll be like, oh wow, what are you doing? So I understand, but it is your responsibility to know these things. You are responsible for your body. I would say 6 months minimum, and also speaking about it.
And it was a coaching session. It was on a Monday. So I said, hi sweetie, how you doing? And she says, oh, I'm doing okay. I said, that's good. How was your weekend? She said, it was okay. I partied and the usual, drank a bit, and I met a new guy. Oh, what's he like? He's okay. I didn't really like him that much, so I wouldn't let him kiss me. Good for you. I'm really proud of you. So I just gave him a blowjob instead.
That is not wisdom.
Casual sex can actually sow seeds of distrust in long-term relationships. When past experiences with multiple partners create insecurities or comparisons, making it harder to fully commit emotionally. It may also contribute to emotional unavailability because you have tried to train your brain over a period of time to practice detachment and avoid vulnerability. These habits can carry over into the future and be seriously heartbreaking when you meet the person that you do want to truly connect with and truly be vulnerable with. Here's the deal. When we treat something that is sacred as disposable, we not just devalue ourselves, but we completely destroy the concept of intimacy. Casual sex has almost become the norm in our culture today. It's hard to look at anything these days without seeing something sexual. Commercials, movies, music, and social media make it look like it's no big deal. But if we're being honest, are we really thriving in this culture of casual sex? Or are we losing something deeper along the way? According to research, 77% of prime-time television programs contain some sexual content. A study in the UK showed that 12% of the pre-war generation, which are people born in the 30s and 40s, pretty much like my grandparents, found casual sex reasonable. But Gen Z, 67% found casual sex reasonable. So after just a couple of generations, it didn't double or triple or quadruple, but it went up 5 times. Now this is really crazy to me. In the United States, age at first marriage and first reproduction has been pushed back dramatically, while at the same time, age of puberty has dropped dramatically, resulting in a historically unprecedented time gap where young adults are physiologically able to reproduce, but not psychologically or socially ready to settle down and begin a family and child rearing. Child rearing, my bad.
Bust it, bust down, bust it, bust it, bust down again.
When we see sexual content all over, it feels so accessible. It feels free and cheap, but hookups come at a cost. There's a physical cost, putting your body at so much risk, desensitizing your body from the natural bonding it wants to do during intimacy. A mental cost, you feeling disconnected, contributing to anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Research showed the less known the partner was, the more likely alcohol was involved. Think about that. Now, I realize that someone completely sober-minded can fully consent to having sex with a stranger, but according to research, it's just more likely that people have to drink more in order to do something like that. What does that say? What does that really say? That means as humans, we know something is not right, and we have to put ourselves in such a distorted state, such a distorted way of thinking, that in order to do something, like we just wouldn't be able to do it sober-minded. I just want to show this chart again and really think about it. This research is showing that the less known the partner was, the more likely alcohol was involved. And a spiritual cost. Casual sex disrupts the divine blueprint for sex and leaves us feeling unfulfilled and leaves us with a numbness to God.
There is no free sex. What is the point? There is no free sex. It does not exist.
When we weigh the cost against the fleeting pleasure, it becomes clear that casual sex isn't just a personal choice. It's a decision with profound consequences for our overall well-being and for society.
The reality is, when we treat sex as meaningless, we risk treating ourselves as meaningless too.
Self-love means protecting your body, emotions, and spirit from harm. Self-love isn't saying yes to anyone who wants you. And it's not even always saying yes to yourself. It's about saying no because you know your worth, and your worth is not cheap. And it's certainly not free. If you are a people pleaser or just struggle with saying no, I have an entire video about setting and enforcing boundaries, because the enforcing is where it really counts. Imagine a world where love is intentional and sex is meaningful. This is the world we can create if we reclaim our worth. What would happen if we all started to treat sex as sacred again? So here's the one thing that is never talked about in these conversations. I think this is the most important part of this video, and that is the purpose of sex.
All right, explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old, okay? Because there's an element to this thing I just cannot get through my thick head.
When we look at religious conversations, a lot of times the purpose of sex is centered around procreation. And those who I will call pro-casual sex would say the purpose of sex is pleasure, right? Like it's an extremely pleasurable experience. But I submit to you, when we look at everything in totality, ancient history, psychology, biology, spirituality, there are three main elements of sex. This is the purpose of sex, where we combine these three forces and we get a trifecta, the purpose of sex. The purpose of sex must always have these three elements in mind: procreation, pleasure, and unity. When we're having this casual sex discussion, sex cannot just be boiled down to pleasure. Casual sex only highlights the pleasure, but the full purpose of sex, procreation, pleasure, and unity is so much bigger than that. It's meant to bring life, joy, and deep connection. When we strip it down to just the physical, we miss out on the fullness of what it's created to be. I rarely hear the element of unity when sex is being discussed. And that's crazy when so much of our biology is bonding and uniting and connecting. And even if children aren't brought into the picture, even if partners are not able to climax, unity is still happening whether you want it to or not. When we engage in casual sex, we move further away from God's plan for love and intimacy. And there is clearly a plan based on everything our body does during and after sex, whether we want it to or not. Casual sex goes against the very purpose of sex.
There is no free sex. What is the point? There is no free sex. It does not exist.
Hey, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned because we have so much to talk about. This
That's the result of just where this thing goes.